A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media, bringing you an RPG review today, but not of a single system. So every year I feel the urge to go back and watch the Star Wars films from Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, all the way through to The Rise of Skywalker. And this year I've decided to hit everything in between, which includes the Clone Wars TV show, the new ones, The Bad Batch, Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, obviously, when it comes out. So today I thought, you know what, because I'm on this huge Star Wars kick, I've been reading, I did a review of the High Republic, the first book in the High Republic novel series. So I thought I'd look at the Star Wars RPGs that I really love. Now, a little disclaimer. I did get into the newer games when Fantasy Flight Games brought out the newer Star Wars games where you could play in the Smugglers era. I forget what they were called. And then there was the Rebellion one. And then the one with the Jedi and stuff like that. And they were good rule systems. I did enjoy reading the rule systems and whatnot. But ultimately, those games were not for me. And although I had the 3 core source books and a few of the adventures that kind of went along with each source book and whatnot, there was a gentleman who posted over here in South Korea that he was looking for those rule books. He couldn't find them anywhere, and did anyone have them to sell? And I ultimately ended up just giving him all of my Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars rule books because I wasn't using them, and he was starting up a group. And ultimately, that's what you should do with books, is just pass them on to people who are going to cherish them and use them as much as you. And if he ended up selling them for a profit, well, who gives a shit, right? It's just a fucking book. Anyway, that's besides the point. I'm going to talk to you about 2 Star Wars RPGs that I absolutely love. And the first is Star Wars, the role-playing game, originally published by West End Games. This is the edition that was reprinted by FFG. Comes in this lovely slip cover. Usually I get rid of these things, but for this, there's no way I'm getting rid of the slip cover. So let's just take a look-see. We get the Star Wars source book and Star Wars, the role-playing game by West End Games. Let's have a quick kind of flick through. Now, this system that they use for Star Wars, universally loved by a lot of people. It uses the 2d6 system, and it's very elegant. Very easy, but it leaves a lot of room for role-playing. There is some power creep, but nothing kind of too bad. It gives you this solo adventure to play at the beginning, which is like a little choose-your-own adventure to kind of get you into the game itself. There's the Games Master section. It's a trap. But it is a really kind of good system, and they kind of set it in the era of the original movies because that's all that was around at the time. But what's interesting to note is that when authors started writing extended universe novels, kind of beginning with Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire, which introduced Grand Admiral Thrawn, anyone that was kind of working on Star Wars stuff, they would give them the West End Games source books to use because West End Games actually created a lot of the alien races and planets and things like that. Salacious Crumb, if no one knows who he is, Jabba the Hutt's little thing. So this was it's a really fun system. Unfortunately, I never got to play it They have an introductory adventure. Always great when games kind of do that. I never got to play this system. I've read this multiple times and I've chatted to people online about it. Adventure ideas, which is cool. And then you've got the character sheets, which is kind of a lot of fun there. And of course, your tables and charts. Now, this was at a time like Luke Skywalker was kind of like the only Jedi, so playing a Force-sensitive character was, I mean, it wasn't prohibited. They didn't say no, but by the same token, you kind of, you get the idea. Star Wars, the role-playing game, one that I want to run soon. The West End Games actually have used this system again for the Zorro role-playing game, which is one that I will review in the future. It is an RPG that I absolutely freaking love because I love the Zorro trademark. But this was the Star Wars. Now, this also came with the Star Wars, let's get that out of the way, the Star Wars source book. And this is just Bill Slavicsek, who actually wrote some fantastic Dungeons and Dragons novels when it was moving into like 4th edition. A really good kind of elemental evil series of books, which are really fun. So it goes into spacecraft systems, starfighters, combat starships, space transports, droids, repulsive vehicles. You can actually play a droid in this game, by the way. Imperial ground assault vehicles, allies, Ewoks, Gamorreans, Ithorians, Jawas, Mon Calamari, Quarren, Sand People, Sulistans, Twi'leks, and Wookiees. Then there's creatures, Banthas, Dewbacks, Minox, the Rancor, Space Slugs, and Tauntauns. You recognize all these if you've seen the original trilogy. General equipment, lightsabers, stormtroopers, rebel bases, imperial garrisons, heroes and villains, and there's information on Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, Mon Mothma, Lando, C-3PO, R2-D2, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Boba Fett, and Vader. And you get all of that in this beautiful, beautiful source book with all their stats and everything to help you kind of create and set up. Playing in the original trilogy. So that is the Star Wars role-playing game by West End Games. Now, why do I love this game so much if I've never fucking played it? Well, that is a good question. So, when I was in high school, I actually mail ordered a way to get the book, the Star Wars role-playing game book, and absolutely loved it. But at the time, I was DMing a Dungeons and Dragons game for my friends, and we were also dabbling a little bit in Shadowrun, and I just never got around to introducing the Star Wars role-playing game. But that book was actually the first book outside of Dungeons and Dragons, the first RPG book that I bought and read and loved the system. Unfortunately, there were a ton of source books for this, and I never got any, but I'm pretty sure you can kind of get them on Drive-Thru RPG these days. But it's something that I really want to explore, and I really want to run for my players at the moment, although we are 1 year into a Call of Cthulhu campaign, which is still going. So that might be a pipe dream, but we'll see. Now, the next Star Wars game that I really enjoy, and people might poo-poo this, is Star Wars role-playing game from Wizards of the Coast. Now, I like this because it uses the kind of Dungeons and Dragons rules. This is the revised core rulebook. Now, interestingly enough, I had a ton of the original rulebook and all of that, and I gave it to a friend when I moved to South Korea. Said, do whatever you want with it, and he didn't have room for stuff, which is all good. This I actually found in a secondhand bookstore in South Korea, and the secondhand bookstore actually had like 50 copies of this thing. It was absolutely insane. So I went there and with my wife, and I bought a whole ton of stuff. Not just this, but other kind of rule books. But this is cool because this takes into account the prequel trilogy, which is really good. They give you all the information about kind of, your abilities and stuff like that. And then what species you can be. Human, Bothans, Syrians. You recognize a lot of these from the Jedi Council in the prequel films. You can actually play an Ewok, Gamorrean, Gungan, Ithorian, Keldor. Master Plo Koon was a Keldor, if I'm rightly. Mon Calamari, a Quarren, Rodian, Solistan, Trandoshan, Twi'lek, Wookiee, Zabrak, the race that Darth Maul was. And then your classes. Fringer, Noble, Scoundrel, Scout, Soldier, Tech Specialist, Force Adept, Jedi Counselor, Jedi Guardian. In this game, you can be motherfucking Jedi if you want to be, depending on when the Games Master is setting the game. And then it gives you all like the abilities. You level up with experience points, first to 20, just like Dungeons and Dragons. And that's what I love about this game. This is basically Star Wars Dungeons and Dragons, which is really cool. There's Jango Fett. And it gives you like a whole lot of allies from the movies. My favorite character of all time, my friend Ian Van Gammett knows how much I love Count Dooku. Those of you that don't know, Count Dooku's lightsaber is different to the other lightsabers because his lightsaber was created at a time when blasters weren't used all that often, so it's more of a fencing lightsaber. The fact that I know that makes me a mega fucking nerd. So you got the main characters and supporting characters. If you want to include them in your games, that's fine. You got the different eras of play. The Rise of the Empire, which is the prequel. The Rebellion era. And then the New Jedi Order, which was the era that the Extended Universe books were set in before Disney went and shat on all of that. So you've got there's just a ton of stuff in this rulebook. This is really, if you've got a Dungeon Master that wants to create their own Star Wars game, this is the only book that you need. You don't need anything else. And I think that's the sign of a really good role-playing game, is if you've got a Dungeon Master that's creative enough, you can just get by with using the main rulebook, or like in the case of Dungeons and Dragons, you've got the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual. But this has enough in it. The core revised core rulebook. But when I got this, I started to kind of get into that. I really want to get more books to maybe kind of, because I, back in the day, had a whole campaign idea for my friend Ian. We had been dabbling in kind of solo play where I would just run a game and he would be the only player. We did it with Warhammer for very few sessions. But I had this idea where he was a Padawan learner on Coruscant and someone was killed, and then he had the choice of investigating or escaping and kind of going off and doing a sandbox world thing. And I was kind of setting it up for he and I to play, and then, life got in the way and whatnot. But there was always something that I really wanted to do. So I'm going to put that to one side over here. So I started to kind of get some secondhand copies of other source books. So I got the Rebellion era source book, Bill Slavicsek again. And this basically just goes over everything you need to know for playing during the time of the original movies. It's really great. It has some great information, some great background stuff. Death Star personnel, if you want to kind of go that. It even goes into Dark Forces, they had the Dark Troopers, if you've ever played the video games. So that kind of comes into play here, Bespin and Cloud City, and between Hoth and Endor, and all kinds of stuff. So the Black Sun Crime Syndicate from Shadows of the Empire, Prince Zizor. Just some really, really great background info if you are kind of interested in all of that. So that was the Rebellion era source book. Then you get books like Coruscant and the Core Worlds. And this book kind of goes into each of the core worlds. Coruscant, Abogado Ray, Alderaan, Anaxis, Belgoth, so on and so forth. Kuat, where they actually have the shipyards. If you're familiar with Star Wars lore, that's where they build the Star Destroyers, or the shipyards of Kuat. Duro, and then you've got like a map of the core worlds. And then it just gives you info on all of the different core worlds. There's Dex on Coruscant. You'll remember him from Attack of the Clones. He's the one that leads Obi-Wan to the planet Kamino by recognizing that it's a Kamino saber dart. And you've got kind of all kinds of stuff on the core worlds. Then you've got Geonosis and the Outer Rim worlds, which is, Bakura, Bandamir, Babi, Bespin, Dathomir, where the Night Witches are, Endor, Eriadu, Geonosis, Kamino, Kessel, Mon Calamari, Sullust, Ryloth. If you're familiar with Star Wars, all of these names are familiar, and they all kind of come with maps and story stuff and all that kind of good stuff, which is really cool. Then we get Ultimate Adversaries. This is just a book on NPCs that you can throw in your game. We have a ton of villains, ton of creatures, ton of droids, and some new rules. Each of these villains are very well fleshed out. We have their goals, their tactics, affiliations, role-playing tips, and what era they would appear in. These are villains we know, like Bosk, and brand new villains like C-3PX, which is a kind of a bounty hunter C-3PO. There is not one of these villains that I don't think has role-playing potential at all. I think they are so well done. They are an absolute joy to read. And oftentimes you will find that two of the villains kind of share a backstory, so you can kind of team them up. Different races, different classes, different motivations, all really interesting kind of stuff. And things that a really good dungeon master will be easily able to kind of put them into games. Then we have like mercenary companies, different organizations that the players can come up against, all that kind of stuff. Then we've got different creatures. You'll recognize the let's see if I can find one from the movies. So yeah, we have fire breathers, all different kind of alien animals that you can populate a planet with. Krayt Dragon. If you've played Dark Forces, when you're on the Hutt pleasure ship, you have to fight one of those, which is really cool. The Monkey Lizard, that's the race that Salacious Crumb is from Return of the Jedi. So yeah, just really cool kind of creatures that you can add to spice the game up. And then We go into kind of different rules, temperatures, new rules, that kind of thing, droids, whatever. Just a cool, book to kind of spice up your game. But I'm saving the best for last because this is one of my all-time favorite source books for any role-playing game. The Dark Side source book. Now, this is great for a number of reasons. This is great because it gives you a history of the dark side of the Force, which is actually explored in a lot of the comics. But if you really want to get into it, it goes all the way back to the creation of the Sith. Then you can play dark side characters if you so desire, if that is a campaign that you want. Gives you new feats, new prestige classes. You can be a dark side devotee, a dark side marauder, an Emperor's Hand, Dark Force Witch, Sith Acolyte, Imperial Inquisitor. You can become a Sith Lord if that's the way your Dungeon Master wants the game to kind of go, or Games Master, Sith Warrior, and then how to play the dark side. But what I love about this book is that the options it gives you, if you want to play like a game where the Force is prominent in your setting, this is one of the best source books. Different equipment, double-bladed lightsabers, Sith interceptor ships, different droids you can use, poisons. And then you've got the dark side traditions, which gives you the early Sith Lord like background and putting them in your game, their statistics. Which, if you've read the extended universe or any of the comics, a lot of these names will be intimately familiar to you. Then you've got the new Sith. You've got Darth Bane, like the Night Sisters of Dathomir, Darth Sidious, Darth Maul, the Jedi Hunters, Aura Singh. Aura Singh plays a large part in the Clone Wars TV show. Then you've got the New Order, which is the original trilogy. Emperor Palpatine, Darth Vader, Prophets of the Dark Side, Mara Jade, the Emperor's Hand. Mara Jade ultimately would go on to marry Luke Skywalker, and they would have a son, Ben. Mara Jade would end up being murdered by the son of Leia and Han Solo, who turns to the dark side during the Legacy series of novels in the extended universe, which Disney have now said are not canon, so fuck you, Mickey. It's just an absolute joy to read. Then you've got archetypes and new dark side creatures, which is cool. There's information on cortosis, which is what they use, like cortosis armor, which can stop lightsabers. Jedi Knights, information on their stats if you're playing a dark side campaign. And it's just and then basically Old Republic, which if you haven't played Knights of the Old Republic 1 or 2, or Star Wars The Old Republic, the MMORPG, you are doing yourself a disservice. Those games are awesome. Rise of the Empire, Rebellion Era, New Jedi Order. And you've just got like kind of how to run a dark side campaign. This is one of my all-time favorite source books. I actually bought this source book in Penrith. And I missed the train. Like, those of you that are familiar with, which not a lot of you probably would be, but from Penrith to Katoomba, the trains ran once an hour, and I just missed the train. So I went to a bar near the train station, and I bought a beer and started reading this, and then like 5 beers later and 3 hours later, I'm like, oh shit, I've got to get on the train again. I was so engrossed in this fucking book that I was just nerding it out in a fucking bar. No wonder no women approached me if I'm reading a Star Wars role-playing game source book in a bar. Well, it's just ridiculous. But one of my all-time favorites source books, and one that I hope to one day incorporate into a Star Wars role-playing game campaign at some point. So, these are basically the two Star Wars RPGs that I have. I did have all of the FFG stuff, but as I said, I gave that away. But these are the two that I will keep in my collection and will not get rid of. I hope to get more source books for each one. I really love these systems. And of course, I love the Star Wars universe. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment, like, subscribe. Do all the stuff at the end of the video. You know, I've got links and whatnot. But yeah, until then, everyone, stay safe. See you in the next video.